Anne Wilson. If you don't yet know me, you should know who I am now. And I'm super excited to introduce you to the amazing Mo Watts. If you don't know her yet, prepare to be absolutely wowed. Mo is, well, one of the things I often say is one of my unique abilities, and I have no idea how, but I attract amazing people in my life, and Mo is no exception. And I'm just so grateful to not only have met Mo, to connected, but actually started creating this great friendship and being inspired by people who are choosing to live vast, expansive lives, challenge themselves, and explore what's possible. So before we get to Mo, I'm going to just let you know a bit about her. She is a multi-award winning leader in the real estate sphere, and she is an eight-figure, yes, eight, and that's not in Vietnamese dong, that's not in Brazilian peso, that's not in South African rand, that's in real currency. We're talking about in GBP, in pounds. Mo is in the UK, and she is considered one of the, well, she has won awards, including Property Woman of the Year, Best SME, multiple awards. She's also the chair of the National HMO, that's the House of Multiple Occupancy, if you don't yet know, and she'll be talking about that network. She really is a powerhouse, but Mo is also a connector. Mo is just whole. When I'm in a room with Mo, when I'm around her, the possibilities just get sparked. She makes me want to do more, be more, explore more. She just opens the possibility and potential for people. And that's why I knew you had to meet her. So yes, we're going to be talking about real estate. We're going to be talking about property investing, specifically in the UK. Now, whether you're in the UK or you want to invest in UK property, it doesn't matter whether you're resident there or not. We're going to be diving in what is going on in there. But I also hope in the session today, you start noticing where maybe you have beliefs around what is possible for you, around your investing, what you can create for the life you live, and how to get assets working for you. And specifically with real estate, so often I hear stories over and over, oh, maybe it used to be good in the past, but no longer works. In the UK, Mo and I, we're going to dive on in. Like, yes, it certainly does seem the government's anti-landlords, but it doesn't mean there's not opportunity there. It's just instead of saying, how do we create the outcome we want within the environment we're in? That's what solution creators are. That's what wealth creators do. They go, hey, this is the set of criteria I have. This is the outcome I want. See it as a challenge and make it so. So Mo, there's so many things I could be saying about you. But I think it's best that you share some of your story, because you really are you're an extraordinary mentor, and you've been featured on TV, BBC TV, ITV, international speakers, so many things. But you're also just somebody who is an advocate for others to see what is possible for them. You're also an immigrant. You're a first generation in the UK who, created this all for yourself. So I think there's so many hurdles you've had to cover and do in terms of this. So before we get into property, just welcome, Mo. I'm going to shut up. There's so much I want to say about you, but big welcome to the Well Chef world.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a welcome. That's really, really flattering. Thank you so much, Anne. And I can say the feeling's absolutely mutual. I just love being around you because your energy is magnetic. So thank you for having me here.
It's an absolute pleasure. So Mo, you retired from corporate life. Well, first you got some pretty damn shit hot, credentials on your education. Then you went and worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers. You're working for Cadbury's, but you actually retired from that life before you were even 30, and you built this 8-figure real estate portfolio. What for you was that trigger when you went, hang on, following that, ticking that box, working hard for money, doing the whole, following what I call eating off the menu of life that we're given. You went, hang on, there's another menu. I don't have to eat off this fucking menu. I can create my own. What triggered that for you?
Well, thank you so much, Anne. I think I had this amazing job at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I remember when my mum opened my offer letter, and the salary kind of was more than a lot of her friends were earning. So she was so shocked. And that was such a great thing and so positive, and I had such a great career with them. But then 9/11 happened, and all the graduates are called in, and we were basically told we were at risk of redundancy. So luckily, because of my skill set, I got headhunted by Cadbury's. I mean, I approached a few companies, but someone heard that I was looking, and then I literally didn't have to go for an interview. So I went over. I literally jumped on a train from London to Birmingham overnight, and I started working there, which was great. And I had a brilliant time. And when I got there, they made me permanent. And they really struggled to put a great salary package together because they said, you're very young and you're at this kind of managerial level and we don't know how to pay you. And I'm just like, just pay me. And what actually happened was they said, look, we're going to give you this salary now. And then come March, we do reviews. So you'll get a better pay rise in March. So just accept what we're giving you now. So I naively accepted it. And then got to March and got my pay rise, 2%. And I sat with my boss then. He said, now, Mo, the days of double digit pay rises are non-existent, and completely forgot the conversation we'd had like a few months previously. So I knew that being in a job and having been made redundant once, I was just like, you can't always rely on a company and a salary, and especially big companies, they do kind of shedding. But at the time, it felt really personal. So
No,
I
this is
just
really
thought,
key because what you're saying, because I think a lot of people, a lot of smart people get hooked in I was listening to another podcast, I think it was called the Bermuda Triangle of great talent, who gets sucked into, especially these big five, the corporate, the consulting side, and an illusion that it's secure and safe, but also the golden handcuffs of a salary, but at trading what? So I'm loving the fact that actually life got to show you that, hey, no, it ain't that pretty quite early. So what then
yeah, and
happened?
I think that was a gift. I mean, at the time, it was heartbreaking. You know, I remember being hauled into that PwC office with a partner, crying my eyes out. How I was going to tell my parents, were so proud. Then I got this job straight away, moved to Birmingham, then had this other kind of shock of like, I was paid really well, don't get me wrong, but it was just that expectation that they gave me that they would pay me again and give me this pay rise. So after that, I realized that working for somebody else was not going to make me money. And I wanted to make money and just create a stable future. So I was very young at the
And
time, so I
you got
enjoyed
in
myself.
control of that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's important to understand that. I think some people think, I mean, I went through redundancy a second time with Cadbury's, and the couple of colleagues I had who went through redundancy at the same time were 20 years senior to me, and they literally had a really tough time. They had families, children in private school. They're very dependent. Some of them had been at Cadbury's all their life. So suddenly that was just whisked away, and they didn't know what they were going to do because they had all these expenses and outgoings, but they didn't, everything had come from Cadbury's, like their pension, their salary, any commission and bonuses. Whereas I had that education pretty early on, and I knew I had to build something else. So what I did was
You,
I gambled, or not gambled, I suppose I should say I invested my Cadbury's bonus of that year into a property training course. And I bumped into a colleague who'd just done this course and said, you've got to do it. So I thought, okay, I was young and naive and ambitious, I guess. So I went on this course and I started buying property and I started building things whilst working. So I was doing 10, 12-hour days. The good thing about Cadbury's and as an employer was I got to leave on time and leave at like 5:24. They had this strange timing so you could work a shorter Friday. I got home in time to watch Neighbours. So if you're based in the UK, you'll know how early that is. But what that meant was the evenings, I didn't spend every evening going out and partying. I actually spent that time researching and looking for property. So that's kind of how I got started. But the absolute kickstarter was that kick in the teeth on the pay rise.
and Mo, I think this is so key when we realize it is up to us and the illusion of a job or an employer being responsible for not only our financial well-being, but our overall life. And now there's nothing wrong with having a job. And I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
We can do this in parallel, but it's about creating these multiple aspects. I also talked about these multiple asset streams. And real estate was a huge part of my journey as well. So, I worked nights to renovate, do this whilst I had my engineering career, because I also realized, earning a salary and creating wealth were two very different things. So
Yeah.
so you started creating this real estate portfolio and so what happened? How did you learn and grow and expand?
Yeah. So I think it's always funny about the first deal that you do because you spend a longer time than you need to, or I certainly did, really researching, making sure that you got everything correct. I bought off plan for my first deal. So I was even mapping out where the radiators were going to go. I went to that kind of level of detail. And I got my keys 9 months later, but although I'd kind of exchanged on it within a few months, it was being built. And it's funny because as soon as I got the keys to the first house, literally deals number 2 and 3 came within 3 weeks. Like I completed on 3 large 6-bedroom houses within the space of a month. And that's the thing. The first one, not only is it psychology, but also just that belief that you can do it, but then it just snowballs and then it just carried on. So in that first year, I built around 1.2 million, just over that, in property, just from like that one, that start really. So I knew it was possible, but I couldn't believe how quickly it had grown. And I still stayed in my job because by then it was a choice and I loved being at Cadbury's. Yes, there was free chocolate. I was also a qualified taster. Who'd want to give that up?
Yeah, I love that, being a qualified chocolate taster. Mo knows how to have a thriving life. Maybe we'll get to that. Mo plays instruments, talking, because this is also, we'll come to that because this is about these assets, these investments are in service of our lives. They don't become our lives, but we've got to put that energy and effort in to create that. So, Mo, you're starting to build, and we're going to come back to some of the real practical what's working in the UK now and learn because, now, I'd pretty much say you've done just about every kind of real estate deal there is, from individual buy-to-lets to house of multiple occupancies to investing in different sites. So, um, across that whole ambit of real estate, we kind of come to what is and isn't working now. We talk about as it really started accelerating, at what point did yes, you mentioned you had that second redundancy, but when did you know that, okay, this could actually become part of your core business? And you've also got some other aspects. So now to get to a critical mass size, what was that point?
I think it was that first year that kind of being able to do the property alongside my job because yes, there was a lot of hours starting up, but once you get these things going, it's kind of when you have a baby or you start a business, the first few months or the first year or two is really tough because you have to do everything and you're running around, you feel there's not enough hours in the day. But once you've got them set up, they actually kind of look after themselves. They need some maintenance and love, don't get me wrong, but generally you can set these things up and if you do it in a certain way, have the right teams in place and the right agents, you can actually have as close to passive income as possible.
I love what you're saying because I think so often people start something. There's an enthusiasm. They start one, they fall into the trap of believing, oh, well, I'll do it on my own, the Lone Ranger. So, they don't want to pay the price up front for good support and training, but then they pay the price down the line
Yeah.
for their own time. It takes longer. But then what also happens is, yeah, that first year, that first deal, that first getting going, the learning curve, everything's foreign, everything new. It can feel tough and
Yeah.
overwhelming. And I think a lot of people betray themselves at that time. They just go, okay, maybe this isn't for me. Now you've also, I know you sometimes joke and call yourself the chubby little brown girl from Tottenham. You know, so you're the daughter of immigrants, you are a brown girl, and there's a lot of identity pieces around, you know, I'm also a woman. There's this aspect of cheating that this investing world isn't for me. I'm meant to do, compliant or do that. How did you overcome the social stereotype and your own, wow, this is tough. Maybe I should just do what I do, be a good compliant corporate girl?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really property, especially in the UK, is really great because actually anyone can get involved. It doesn't matter about your background, it doesn't matter about your education level, it doesn't matter about if you're female or male. It is quite a male-dominated world still, but I love that there is low barrier to entry. So that's one of the good things that anyone can really get started. But I think, I'm one of these people that I want people not to be able to say no to me. So I've kind of had that resilience built up to me growing up. I went to a pretty decent grammar school where girls were quite fierce. And I think that was really, held me in good stead for life. But I think that attitude of just being really positive and just smiling at people, I noticed that building rapport and relationships was really key to
Mm.
moving forward in property. So it didn't matter what I looked like, but then you've got to back it up with the knowledge. So sometimes people would look at me and I looked, quite young at that time. So people didn't believe that I could be a landlady and have all this entire portfolio. So I think that completely went out the window as soon as I started speaking to people, because people do judge on appearances, and I get that. So I just made sure I really knew a lot of things and I could answer questions. And when you had those kind of more difficult people, shall we say, you could always come back and kill them with a smile at the end.
I think this is such an important point because I think it is very easy to get hooked by feeling injustice or indignant or outraged or pissed off with
Yeah.
being looked down on, patronized, or treated in a certain way. But the skill to be able to keep focused on the outcome we want, because those things are devastating distractions, and the only thing that they destroy is us.
I agree.
And
And I think that, sorry, I was going to say, sorry.
yeah, no, and I think this is as two women who've also created very successful businesses, their own financial freedom. I was in engineering, a male-dominated world, in investing in real estate, and I know that one of the things that really helped me was not about pleasing, performing, or being obsequious, but knowing that I could spend my energy being pissed off at being treated like a dumb blonde or being presumed to be, this the tea maker in the meeting room. Um, but actually, when you just go, well, what do I want? And being pissed off and using my energy on that isn't going to serve anybody. I can keep focused on my outcome. And you say,
Yeah.
how do you make sure I knew what I was talking about in the room, not betray and lose myself? We don't have to buy into other people's stories about us. And
Yeah.
so thank you for bringing that into the room, because it really sounds like you were able to stay focused on where you want to go.
And I think it's really important to understand that it's not a competition. If someone's goal is just to be able to have a day off a week, for example, that's the most amazing thing you can give yourself. It's not always about money. And I remember when I first started buying property, I had no car. So I was getting a free tour of Birmingham on a bus, like several buses, before I actually reached my destinations. And I knew that hour journey bus could be replaced by a 15-minute car journey. So I bought a car. And I was thrilled to buy this smart 4 car, which, was like the same size as a Nissan Micra. And just going from no car to a smart car was incredible. Now, I may have had a couple of bumps and possibly fixed the bumper with some gaffer tape, same color as the car. But people didn't really believe that I could have property because of my car. And I didn't care because obviously explained I didn't have a car. But and people used to mock me, particularly men, that were just like, "Oh, you really have property, do you? And that's what you drive." Then I showed up with my Lexus one day, one of those brand new hybrid. It was all the rage at the time, and everyone shut up. And I couldn't believe how much people put on status of your belongings. And recently I've shared with you that we've bought a Lamborghini, and again, it's that same thing of it's validation to other people. We've bought it because it's really pretty, but at the end of the day,
It's
other people
purple. How
really
cool is
judge you
that?
on your stuff. They judge you on your stuff, and it's annoying. But you've got to remember that it's not a competition. It's not a race. You've got to just think about what's going to work for you. If it's an extra £500 a month, and that will just make sure that the credit card is paid off, you have money to go out and do your hair. That's an amazing goal.
Yeah.
So I just say, just don't ignore everyone else. Think about what you really want, because no one else is paying your bills. At the end of the day, you are.
No one's also living your life. You're the ones going to be in your own skin, and make sure you're spending that time, energy, money, and energy on that. So you created this amazing portfolio. I mean, you've built up and businesses and teams in India, and also we'll come back to the importance of also after that first tough year, how do you start automating and building the teams and the support structures around you so that you can keep expanding that? But Mo, what do you think is the biggest mistake you see new investors make
Yeah.
when they want to start and get involved?
I think what happens is a lot of new investors see the TV programs and they assume they have to do property in a certain way, do a really high-end refurbishment without calculating the sums and doing some proper planning of what the costs are going to be. Because development, particularly, it's kind of fluctuating a bit. It's come down a bit, but it was skyrocketing because of materials. And I think the biggest mistake that first-time investors make is that they don't go in with the right kind of knowledge and information, and they just see a TV program or they see their friend do it and they think that's it. They should really go and educate themselves. If you go to, when you go out to the world of work, you've often done schooling, some university, maybe you've done some specialist training or, a specialism course for that particular job. But it amazes me that when people go to invest in any financial instrument, they just go off or they just listen to somebody else. They don't learn the basics themselves. And so that's kind of why I've been convinced to do this property training now, because I make my money in actually buying property. But I learned that way. I mean, I wish someone had taught me a lot more when I first got started. But if you think that the average degree takes 3 years, and then people would just do a property course over like a weekend, and then they think they're a property investor. I mean, it's just incredible for me to think that, because you really do need some good information behind you and the tools and resources. And now, compared to 20 years ago, the amount of kind of technology, AI that's available to assist you and make it quicker is phenomenal. But you really need to be shown how to use those things. So that's what I would say. First-time investors, just go and get yourself educated, go and meet people, go to the networking events, get some training, just educate yourselves, but do it properly. Don't just think that 2 days is going to make you a master at this.
And I think that's really key. And then you've got to be in it and learn baby steps and go. And I think what is one of the real traps of real estate investing is because most of us have lived in a home of some sort at some point in our lives, we can be lulled into thinking we know
Yeah.
what real estate is. And often people say, and there's this beautiful apartment or this house I've seen, it's got this garden and it's in and yeah, and I really love it. Do you think, should I buy it? I'll go, I have no clue. Show me the numbers. And you
Yes.
mentioned that it is all about numbers. It's all about understanding who your market is, who your buyer, your slash tenant, it's marketing. And are you providing a solution that meets that market? And so, Mo, one of your big parts of your portfolio are HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. So, can you just explain a little bit of what that is
Yeah,
and
of course.
why you enjoy that as one way to invest in real estate?
Yes, of course. So houses of multiple occupation, the legal definition is two or more unrelated people or households living in the same property. So if your brother and sister living together in the same property, that's not an HMO. But if it's your brother and his friends, let's say, because there is a kind of watered down definition if you know the person. But let's say it's two people that don't know each other living in the same space. That's essentially a house of multiple occupation. And then what happens is in the UK, there's some regulation now. So depending on where you're buying the property and the number of people you're having within the property, you may require a separate license to actually rent that property out. And the reason for that is what we know from the stats is when two or more unrelated people are living together, the risk of fire can be greater. And if you're a family living in a dwelling and a fire happens, you know each other, you're more likely to put each other out. But if you're in a house of multiple occupation, if you don't know the other people, you don't necessarily know they're even in. So that's why there's some regs around that.
Fantastic. So why does it make why do you enjoy HMO as a real estate one of the models that you use?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are different models you can use in HMOs, and I've got everything from like two unrelated people living together right through to 20. So the reason I like it is because it really serves the a particular social and economic demographic where people who probably could afford their own studio or might not be able to afford living on their own would like a safe, comfortable, nice place to live. I certainly wanted that when I was a student and I went into one of these HMOs. And I found it really frustrating when I found living with other housemates where people didn't pull the weight, like cleaning, or, you know, you didn't have that social community kind of aspect, which I kind of wanted. So people just went in and locked their doors, and that was pretty much it. So I wanted to create kind of community style housing where people could lock themselves away if they needed to, but they also had a great environment to share so that when they were moving, say, to a new town or starting a new job somewhere, they had this, you know, just add hot water in a suitcase and you've got your instant life and you're not feeling scared because, you know, it can be quite scary, especially when you're a young professional moving to a new place and you don't know anyone. Because, you know, London in particular can be very lonely if you don't have a network. And so I just felt that this was a great demographic. Also, we know that economic pressures mean that this is the cheapest form of housing. And I wanted to provide safe, comfortable houses for people to live. Because at the end of the day, as a young woman, I could live in any of my properties. They're all extremely safe, they're well located, they have all the amenities that I would want. So I've gone in a little bit with my eyes, thinking about the end result. But at the end of the day, the reason I love HMOs, not only can you solve this housing crisis and need, but you're also making money for yourself. And if you do HMOs in the right way, they are still quite profitable. Yes, you might have higher costs, but you can charge higher rents as well.
Mo, I love how you describe it because you've also spoken to one of the stories or the fears or the kind of energy that's out there that being a landlord is you greedy and not in this sort of image of the greedy landlord taking, abusing these poor tenants who've got no choice and options. And, that is one of the sides. Or, yeah, it's just that property investors just cobble together something shitty, do a lick of paint
Yeah.
and rent it out. But actually, you maintain, I mean, it's this extraordinary sort of percentages that I've seen in some of your stats, like a less than a 0.1% arrears rate across your portfolio. But I want to come back to, how you do that. And also, many people are afraid of these tenant horror stories, but you've really described how you can have this vision for a better place, a vision. You really went and said, well, what do I want? Community, connection. I want to feel safe. I don't want to have to be, because I can only afford X amount, have to live in a little shitty hovel where I can hardly, swing a rat, let alone a cat. You can have space, and there's how, because this kind of solution thinking is, I think, really where if we understand that money flows to value, and if you're a value creator, it will flow to you. So, because a lot of people say, well, surely that's at odds, creating a great environment for people and making money isn't. So how did you it feels like you just knew that, but
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, bad refurbishment is bad business. So I hate it when I see poor refurbs because firstly, you're going to have to fix that like within a year. So you always, I mean, certainly in all of our properties, we do kind of a mid-level range of refurb. So we're not kind of the Knightsbridge, if you know London, and we're not. I'm trying to think of a poorer part of London now, but I don't want to single any area out. But the point is that we're kind of in the middle. So we always make sure that our refurbs are really good quality. And the reason for that is very simple. It's great business. It's providing great homes that are comfortable and safe. And you're going to save on your repair bill and time, because if you have a bad refurb, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have the tenants calling you all the time. you can have somebody out. Whereas if you do everything properly up front, yes, of course, there's tenant damage that happens. But if you do everything properly up front, then it's just longer term, with better return for your money, essentially. So that's what I would always encourage. But yes, of course, there are people that just kind of paint over mold and crazy stuff like that. I mean, there's paint systems that actually get rid of mold. So why they do that, I have no idea. But there are so many great ways of refurbishing property and amazing solutions, because the housing stock in the UK, a lot of it was just designed for post-war, post-Second World War, to last for temporary housing for 20, maybe 30 years. It's still being used today. So because we don't have enough housing, we're having to find these retrofit solutions to try and alleviate some of the problems that come up with these housing at the moment. So I just think that it's really important to kind of take care, because if you take care of people, and that's what you're doing. I had a tenant who told me, swore blind, he was going to move into one of my HMOs for 3 months, and he asked for a 3-month contract, and I actually gave it to him. I don't normally do that. Normally it's a 6-month or 12-month minimum, but I knew he was going to stay. How long do you think he stayed in that property?
I'm guessing at least 3 years.
12 years. So what you'll find is, because of the social and economic benefit, people then have more disposable income for their life, and they could do other things. And, it was convenient for his work. But what you're finding is people that move into HMOs don't often move out. I mean, the average tenancy term for an HMO when I first started was around 9 to 12 months. And now I would say the demographic has changed. So professionals, it used to be definitely sort of 21 to 35. And we've got tenants that are well into their 50s now that take HMO rooms, because people are saying, I don't want to spend all my money on housing. I want to enjoy life. I'm happy with not having the hassle of maintenance and thinking about the garden and what's my bill, what's going to be my gas bill, what's the council tax. They don't want that. They want a really easy, hassle-free life, because their job is taxing enough, and just keeping on top of life is getting harder. So if they can sort their housing out.
Direct your investing elsewhere. I think the myth that a home is your castle, that it defines you, and that's your greatest asset, is also people are seeing through that myth as a you've got to have your home yourself. And I think that's what's also really important, differentiating being a real estate investor and a provider of value for others versus the home you live in. They're very different things. We'll come back to you and your beautiful homes you've got. So right now, in the UK, there has certainly been a sense that the UK government's anti-landlord, the things like, mortgage relief for people investing and holding real estate in their own private name has been removed. There just seem to be more and more costs. So if somebody was in the UK wanting to start investing now, where would you advise them to start, besides coming and learning from you, which we're going to direct everybody to?
Yeah, of course.
What are the sectors that people consider, or is it more about how they structure it? Where would you suggest they start narrowing down their focus?
Well, it depends on the level of investment they've got. So I'm not one of these people that says, go and get a load of credit card debt and buy my course kind of thing. I'm looking at people that have got savings. So if you've got about £25,000 of saving, you could do something really interesting with that. If you've got a bit less, you can still do some good things. But I invest in both residential and commercial property. Residential's got fewer barriers to entry if you go in as a buy-to-let investor. But what's happened in the UK is, because of these legislative changes, the lending market's changed. So when I first started, borrowing as a limited company was really tough. And what then happened, because of these rules, you can actually now borrow in limited companies at rates very, very similar to buying in your own private personal name. And there are some really good tax reliefs. If you do set up a limited company, of course, you can still claim the mortgage interest relief. But depending on your structure, and if you're husband and wife, you still can claim some tax reliefs in your own private personal name. So it just depends on what your starting pot is and what your end game is. Why are you doing this? Because once you know that, then you can map out the strategy. So what I'm hoping to show, because I've done lots of different types of property deals in both residential and commercial, I'm kind of trying to be the department store of information about all of these different strategies, so that people can choose their own path. And then I'm going to be providing the resources and the network and the kind of experts you need to kind of make that strategy happen. So I think it just depends. But I would just say, firstly, just get yourself on something like Rightmove and Zoopla. It's something I'm going to cover in my first module. Just get yourself an account and start looking at properties in an area that you know, because you'll start to see some patterns forming. You'll see where the drops are. You'll see some properties that aren't shifting, but you'll start to understand an area, and that will just slowly build up your confidence. So if you're just looking to do some research at the moment in the UK, you could do that anywhere in the world. You just literally go onto one of those sites and sign up for some alerts.
No, absolutely. I've often said, real estate is 110-1. You've got to look at 100. Once you've got clear on your strategy, what are you looking at? Is it, a single buy to let? Is it an HMO? You've got to look
Yeah.
at 100 properties to 10 might look like they can work from the deal, knowing the numbers and doing the numbers and knowing what you need to look at. And one almost should be closed. But as you said, the internet, we have access to more information than we ever had even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, what you can find. So the structure. So in the UK, would you suggest that for most people, I just want to confirm,
Yeah.
it is better to have some sort of limited company structure to build up
No.
that portfolio?
No, it depends. So basically, with commercial property, you can get that mortgage interest relief without buying stuff in your own personal name. But there are a few more barriers to buying commercial property. For example, you probably need a higher deposit. Generally, it's around 35%. So, and then there's a lot of information you might have to give on your lending application as well. So I think it depends on your strategy. You shouldn't just set up a limited company. You can set one up in a day. So wait until you've got the
Yeah.
deal and
Yeah,
then
you
work
don't
it
have to
out
rush.
because
And so I think a lot of
yeah,
people go set the
absolutely.
company out before they even know what their strategy is.
Yeah, don't do that. Literally, you can set up a limited company and a bank account in within 24 hours now in the UK. And also, lenders are quite fussy about limited companies. So if you've got an existing limited company and then you try and buy a property, but it doesn't have the right SIC code, then they won't lend to you. So you might have to set up a SPV anyway, but it's a lot easier. And I think that's what the whole accounting world has massively transformed, and setting up companies is so much easier now. If you are based abroad, I still feel like you have to have some sort of UK director listed. But essentially, don't set up a company before you know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really key. And I think what you're saying, we've always got to have the end in mind. What are we trying to create? Is it a certain amount of cash flow to fund a lifestyle? Is it growing capital value to build that net worth, but not keep that income coming in? Really
Yeah.
key. Now, I love you sharing a story that you helped a client save a 1 million on some
Yeah.
deals. Tell me a little bit about that, and what were the things that enabled that to save that, and therefore that went into their back pocket.
So this was a high net worth individual looking for a property in London, and it's an area that I invest in. I know quite well. I know the agents, and I knew about the property that they were investing or wanting to buy, and I knew it'd come back and forth off the market a few times, but it looked brand new to this particular client. So I had some history because I had the alerts, etc. So when we came to negotiate that, I kind of had a bit of a history of what the problems were. And that's the thing. So one of the analogies I use about buying property for less is thinking about going to the market. So in the UK, the supermarket, there are deals to be had, but there's always a reason why there is a deal. So first of all, we have yellow stickers on produce, which is great. And translate that into a property analogy, it's time pressure. So somebody has to sell because maybe they're moving abroad, or maybe they need the cash for something else, or they're going to lose the onward purchase. There's lots of reasons why people have time pressure. There's the other analogy, which is that kind of poor basket at the end of an aisle, which has got the dented tins and the slightly ripped packets. Again, same thing with property. When you find properties that need a bit of TLC, they go for less. So, and then my personal favorite is the bog off. buy one, get one free. So this isn't quite the same in property, but it's like a volume discount. So if you're buying 3, 6, 10 houses, you can normally negotiate whether you're buying a portfolio or whether you're buying like from a developer, you can normally negotiate a discount. And I've certainly done that several times. So what I did was I kind of understood the position. I worked with the agent. He wanted to get his commission because the property had come back and forth several times. And we just built a rapport, and we actually managed to get through to the vendor and build that rapport, and understood what they wanted and the time pressures they were facing. And that's how we did the deal.
And I think what you're really coming back to is to treat your real estate investing like a business. Because any
Absolutely is,
business
yeah.
is saying, what's the market out there? What is the market wanting? How do we make this a win-win? You speak, what is the vendor wanting? Oh, and to not assume, I think one of the biggest challenges that I overcome, and I see for many people in real estate, is assuming that there's this adversarial buyer asks for something and everybody wants the same thing out of a deal. They don't. Some people might not need the cash up front, but they want just no longer have the hassle. Getting to know and being prepared to slow down, ask those questions is so it's a deal making
Yeah, I
business.
mean, I would say like we've all had something, yeah, it's happened in our life where we just want rid, and we just, anything to kind of get rid of that. I had a car with an ex, and we got it for free, and or £50 or something. It was anyway, it was really not a great car. And at the end, he was just like, I'm not going to get involved in this. And so literally, I just wanted to get rid of it. I just gave it away. I think I put it up for sale for £50 and I just actually gave it away. So, there are times, and you can understand why people want to get out of the property if they're under that kind of pressure. Not everyone is under that pressure, which is why I use that supermarket analogy. There are perfect goods in the supermarket that you'll pay full price for. Fine. But in property, there are those deals where they're slightly kind of undervalued because of a reason. And that's the thing, you've got to understand the reason why people accept less. You can't just go in hard nosed and say, I only would pay you £500,000 for it when somebody's asked for 600,000. The world just doesn't work like that. So you have to be sensitive. Often people are selling their own homes, so they're quite attached. So when you're negotiating, you really have to understand the other person's point of view and what they need.
And I think to also remember that you also don't have to buy that. There's always another deal. I want to come to Anthony's question, but just coming to that, because a lot of people say, well, isn't it just too expensive now? Isn't real estate in the UK had its heyday? There's no deals now. It's too expensive. There's too much demand. There's the government's anti it. Well, I know for 30 in your world, that's not true at all. You've got an amazing portfolio. But for people coming in now saying, oh, well, those of you who started in the early 2000s, that's one
Yeah.
thing. They're not the same now. What's the truth about opportunity?
Oh, wow. Well, this is what I love, because if people think that, there's more for me and my delegates to buy. Because at the end of the day, the next couple of years are going to be an incredible opportunity because interest rates for lending are still pretty low. You can get levels around 4 to 6%, which is great because when I first started buying, it was around 6 to 8%. So that's one key thing. Secondly, a lot of landlords are leaving the market because they want to cash out for various reasons. They are fed up with the legislative changes. But if you're coming in new, this is all going to be matter of course. This is going to be your standard operating procedure. So you're going to be learning from a point that everything's new and this is going to be just standard. So whereas another landlord who's been doing it for 20 years has had to go through all these iterations and changes and extremely frustrated with that. And, I can appreciate why a lot of people want to leave. And with the mortgage interest relief, yes, that has changed things for a lot of people. But there are some clever tax opportunities if you've been running your portfolio as private individuals, but as a partnership, because there is something you can do to kind of rebase your portfolio, which I remember I spoke to you about,
Yes.
and when we last met. And I think quite a few people around us were kind of, mind was blown. So there are ways to mitigate that. But if
I
you're
just want
starting
to,
afresh,
yeah, I'm going to come back to that. Keep going.
oh, okay, sure.
No, so if you're starting afresh,
Yeah, so you're
just
starting afresh. I would say let's just look at the opportunities. This is why, a lot of people just teach buy to let, but there's lots of different opportunities in property. So what you need to figure out is what you like doing. If you're a people person, you probably will get on really well with HMOs or holiday lets or service accommodation. If you don't want to interact with people and you're a hard numbers person and you want to do more analytical thinking, commercial's great. The long-term leases, you don't have a lot of interaction with the tenant. If you're looking at just, something easy, very small, just to cut your teeth into, a one-bedroom flat in a really highly lettable area is a good way to start. So you just have to look at your budget, learn the different strategies, and then figure out which one resonates with you.
Your budget, your resonate, yeah, your outcome, who you are, and what you're wanting. It's just really getting that Venn diagram coming in. So for those of you who've got some real estate in the UK, maybe been owning some buy-to-let portfolios in your own name, this is really interesting. So Mo, I don't need you to go deep into how to do it, but I
Sure.
think I want people to understand that there are options. This is the thing. Often we don't know what we don't know. And so we assume we're stuck in a specific way. So just a high level framework, and people I'm going to give you Mo's contact details, how you can connect with her and through business shortly. But you mentioned that if people going, well, I can't get mortgage relief, but in partnerships, can you just give broadly that framework of so people go, oh, that maybe be something that I can explore with Mo?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is like a very advanced tax strategy that one of my tax guys explained to me. But if you've been running a legitimate partnership in your private name, so maybe you're a husband and wife, and you've got a portfolio of properties, and you've been running them together as a business, but it's all in your personal names, then there is a one-time event as a trading business that you can incorporate and become a limited company. Now, that means moving all your mortgages. There's some tax implications. You've got to write to HMRC often to get clearance. But if you can prove all those things, then what's interesting is you can rebase your portfolio at the current level for capital gains. So this is a great strategy if you can pass those very hard tests, but if you can do it, that's great. So maybe you can test it with your mum.
Is it deemed a transfer trigger in terms of capital gains? Would you have to
No,
pay?
and SDLT, that's the point. So this kind of strategy, and it is quite niche, but if you pass all of these tests, and I've just kind of summarized them, then no, that's the whole point, because you are actually effectively a business and a trading partnership.
Yeah, and so it's just a restructuring of the business structure. It's not actually seen as an ownership transfer for a CGT trigger. That is
Yeah.
so sexy. And this is the thing. I think often we don't slow down to realize a lot of how we get our assets working harder for us are just understanding structures, reducing tax, not having to always just earn the next thing. So often we can be chasing the thing, or we just accept a change. I know one of our wealth builders, Eleanor, she's got a fantastic portfolio in partnership that I don't know, Eleanor, you might have already done this, but these are the kind of things that if you don't even know to ask if it's possible. And I think this is why it's so important to be in communities that are having these conversations, having the right mentorship support. Like, oh, wow, that just one thing from both capital gains, then being able to get mortgage relief and all these other things could literally make somebody thousands and thousands just in that one trigger, knowing the right question, knowing who to ask, and the network available. So Anthony said, I'm old enough to have lived through MIRAS and the phasing out of claiming mortgage interest as a claimable expense. Are you concerned about potential rent caps in the future?
Yes and no. I suppose my concern about potential rent caps is what I feel will just cause a lot of problems in the housing stock. But I use supported living as one of my strategies, and the rent caps aren't really applicable because when a company or the government needs housing, they pay. So I'm not worried about that, but I do worry about just the housing stock in general. It's abysmal. And I think if the government were to introduce it, it will just reduce the housing stock even further when they haven't built the houses they need to replace this supposed, affordable housing. So I'm not sure. I think there'll be a lot of pushback on these things. Like, you know, they might push something through and then it might change later. What you may have even noticed that your mortgage interest relief, they ask you to record it on the form still. So I'm wondering in the future if they're actually going to allow that and allow it to be, you know, that's why you're having to record those figures on your tax form every year so that it's claimable in the future. I have no idea, but they've got to do something to improve the housing stock. We haven't got enough skills in the country to build the housing that we need. We're not building enough. We're not giving incentives. We're beating builders over the head and developers over the head. So why would they want to do it? They're just sitting on a load of land at the moment, you know? So I think some changes have to happen. And I think there'll be a lot of round robin through the Lords and Parliament, just going back and forth and kicking back things. You know, one of the barristers I was talking to said that the housing court reform was meant to be introduced 25 years ago, and they promise it's going to be here to kind of replace Section 21s, and still this housing court is nowhere to be seen. So I am not sure that everything that they're saying will happen in a very quick manner. I do know about the renters reform. I know that they've done it and not thought about every single scenario. So there's some iterations going on, particularly around student rentals, because it doesn't work for either party, tenant or landlord. So yeah, I mean, I'm not overly concerned about rent caps. I suppose is the easiest way to answer that.
And please, everybody else, jump on in. Let's get your questions going. We've got Mo. So Hansi said, if my partner and I would like to start a limited company with the properties we own, some together, some individually, could we add the properties in various countries to this business? Is it better to have different companies in different countries?
Really good question. So when we were looking at international lending and, you know, structures, etc., one of the things that came up was sanctions. And I think it is just cleaner to keep your UK property in a limited company. They're really easy to set up. So I wouldn't necessarily muddy the two, because with some of the tax changes, I think it depends where you're domiciled as well. You may pay tax on some property that you don't need to pay tax on. So I think it depends where your properties are. But I would probably suggest that you need a specialist tax person to look at your portfolio and work out the best tax center and work out, you know, the income and, you know, are you putting it in the right place? Is it going to pension pots? Is it just staying in your bank account? So there might be some more tax efficient ways, but I wouldn't rush into it. I'd get a really good tax expert, probably in the country that you live in, to ask what's the best way. And big firms and actually some small firms will have a counterpart in the country that you might have property in that they can refer to and work out what the latest things is. I mean, I grew up, my dad was a tax consultant, and so we had Tolly's tax guides on the shelf, and he used to teach me a lot around tax and helped me with all that planning. So I was really lucky. So I learned a lot about the tax stuff. But what I can tell you is things change every year. To keep up with it, thank God there's AI, and it does summarize some of it. But having a key brilliant tax person, I know they're expensive. I know when I pick up the phone to mine, it's a few grand a time, but it's so worth it because they really know what to do and they keep you on the right side of the law. And that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, Mo, you've really, I've said people end up paying for the wrong things. You know, they'll outsource their financial well-being to this financial advisor who's just a low-level broker of crappy investment products. And they'll pay 1% of their, the investable net worth to them without even knowing they're doing that. And in fact, that's pretty easy to do, but not pay for the things that are important, like actual skills about shortcutting how to do it. And one of the areas for me is pay for good tax advice and pay to be taught to know what to do rather than believing you just can't. So just on that, absolutely generally, pay for good tax advice, get that. And generally, you want to keep your assets in different countries wrapped in those countries. It's going to affect how you, as most of key, understanding the different tax regimes, because one of the things with rental income is generally taxed in the country where that rental income is earned, as opposed to other incomes. So you'd end up in a very complex tax situation if you've got rental income all in companies going into one corporate entity, but you can still put an overall holding company that could have shares in companies. So differentiate between the structure that holds the actual real estate versus operating, you can have an operating company that could take management fees and stuff. So this is why, getting into communities like Wealth Builders, like understanding Mo's community, her mentorship, you start thinking in, oh, let me differentiate between how my money flows and what am I trying to achieve in that.
Yeah. I
The
mean, you have
real
to look out for like things like double taxation treaties, and also when when you die, like, do you have to have a will in that country as well? So there's not just the financial aspect, there's the actual kind of other inheritance tax, for example, aspect, and how you pass properties on. And is your will in the country that you live in valid in another country? So that's why it's really important to get the right advice and to pay for the right person to help you.
So if you're in the UK, if you're thinking about real estate investing, if you've got some, let's get your questions into Mo. You can put your hand up and ask her out loud, or you can type it in. But while we're waiting for those, so Mo, that first that you spoke about, getting those first deals or few in, doing a lot of that work for yourself. Now we're starting to speak about the structures, the teams in place, and you are an absolute whiz of getting amazing teams and people doing the work so that you can keep being the solutioner, the creator of all sorts of things, because the real estate is just one part of Mo's empire that she has of this extraordinary life you live. So what has been one of the things that really helped you create support structures that have enabled you to keep lifting yourself up?
I think being part of the right communities and people that are positive, and can help you solve the issues that you're facing, because somebody, if you're in the right community, has faced that challenge before and can help you. And I mean, I've got an outsourcing company that we give a lot of work to, that I've been working with for over 17 years. And we started off with one person, and now we've built that up to 200, and they're based in India. We started an accountancy practice, a low cost accountancy practice, because quite really fed up with the crazy fees that SMEs were getting charged. And so we just thought we'll cut out the middleman and just go direct. So the interesting story about that is that we had a transcriptions company. And if any of you are in that world, I mean, we had clients like Reuters, all of the big London hospitals and universities across the country. And transcriptions has died because of AI. So we looked at how we could reskill our team, and we equipped them with zero qualified status. And we're now qualified zero partners. That's a big accounting software. And we've now got a huge team doing accounts for lots of SMEs across the UK and also in Australia as well. So I think what you have to do is look at what you actually have to achieve in your business and look at the best way to resource that. Often what people do is they just go off and get an office. They just go off and think that they need a PA and they need like a salesperson, but they don't actually map out the role and the tasks of what they actually need doing. So it's really good, especially if you're starting up from the ground up. You write down everything you're doing, because when you're starting your own business, you are everything. You are sales and marketing, you are the janitor, you're, absolutely everything in the business.
The
But once you
toilet
write all
paper
those tasks,
replacer.
once you write all those tasks down, you can start to compartmentalize. And you also have to remember that when it's your business, you work in a certain way and you're more passionate. When you employ people, they're employed to do a certain task and they'll do it well. But you have to limit what you give them. They can't do everything. You can't make someone that does finance do your sales as well. It's a different skill set. So you need to be thoughtful around that. So yeah.
No, I love that. I think that's really key, slowing down, actually saying these are the activities that are done and believing that there are people who want to do that, who can do it well, and that you can
Yeah.
afford. Because I see a lot of people limiting their business, their wealth, their life because they've refused to get support in. And so
Yeah.
they become the bottleneck. They get resentful on this.
Yeah.
So track what you're doing. Don't just take a cookie cutter, just like you don't take, just because you think you've lived in a house, you know what real estate is. Don't just take a cookie cutter. This is what an org looks like. What is it that you're actually doing? What actually needs replacing? Design it and get those those in place. Anthony said my office is a converted ship container in central London. I love that.
Great, that's brilliant. And
And those,
those ship containers are great investments, by the way. I have a quick story for you. So somebody I know, they were trying to sell some land, and it was with a house. And what they did was they put one of these shipping containers on to make it look like it was a storage facility. And it increased the price. They got, I think, £10,000 more for the land as a result of this shipping container, which I think they bought for about 3,000.
and if
So
a
yeah,
person's going to make up stories, well, that's on them. I love that. So, Mo, there's so many things we can talk about, but before we just come to the closing questions, how do people contact you? And I know you've got a fabulous free training for people just to get familiar with what are the things to consider. How do people find that?
great. So I've started a new initiative called propertymotivator.com, like Mo, my name. And this was born really out of everyone saying to me, you give advice, you really should kind of make a training so other people can follow it easily and think about the different strategies. And you're a woman of color, immigrant, you started with absolutely nothing. You've got a lot to offer, because when you think about these things, you think, why would anyone want to do this with me? So we have got a free training available. It's like the first iteration, which is going to be available for you guys only, whilst we get all the bells and whistles. All the content's there, but you'll just have to bear with us whilst we add more bells and whistles. But to join, just go to propertymotivator.com, register, just put your name and your email, and then we'll send you a link to the free training.
No, that's fantastic, Mo, because I think being one of the biggest barriers for so many people to actually getting to live the life that they really want, to be able to thrive, to have the money flowing in their life, to have these assets, a portfolio of assets serving them, and really breaking free, that liberation to live the life that they meant for, is just even not even knowing that that is possible, and breaking out of that fog of that life is meant to be a struggle and I have my small little life like this. And so firstly, I'm just so thrilled our community gets to meet you and say, Mo, you created this yourself. I mean, there's so much I would love you to know about Mo and the other part of your life. You've got something like 6 homes. You say you created 200 people business out of India. Mo is really just challenges well, what's possible? And you come to this with such an energy of playfulness. It's more like, well, let's see if I can do this rather than I have to. And so for you, Mo, this is one key thing, is it possible? And second, then, is it possible for me? And so you and I know it's absolutely possible. There's more than enough deals to go around. We don't have to compete. There are deals every day. We can learn the skills of how to evaluate a real estate deal, an equity deal, how to get our investing happening, automate and serving us. But what is that one thing that you see and for yourself that went, okay, it might be possible, but to shift and say, but it's possible for me? What is that switch?
I think the confidence comes when you actually do your first negotiation, even if you're not going to buy the property. So before I bought my first property that I told you about, that took me 9 months, I actually went and employed the skills that I learned about negotiation. Now, I'm Asian and it's in our blood to negotiate, but I was going to negotiate a house that was 490,000, and it didn't work on the rental, but I thought, you know what, this is great, I'm just going to go and negotiate. And I managed to get the agent to reveal that they'd rejected an offer of 340,000, but 350,000 might cut it. So in that one deal, and I was very young at that time, I realized I could do it because I could negotiate confidently. And I think that's what everyone can do. But a low stakes thing of doing that is just go to eBay and just make an offer on something that you want to buy, like a top or something that, just ask for a discount. British people don't ask for discounts. And my mum used to go to a department store called John Lewis and she would haggle. And people can't believe that she did that back in the 80s and 90s, but she did. And she got money off because they were never knowingly undersold. So I think that the important thing is you can do it, and you just need to be shown how to kind of negotiate and why people will let you buy a property for a different price. I mean, some properties are overpriced as well in the market. You know, vendors have been told something, they put it on the market, but actually they wanted something less. I've certainly bought quite a few properties like that. So, you know, I think the first thing is just go and negotiate and haggle on something that is a low value. You know,
I
go to a
love,
shop, see if you can
you
get
know,
that reduced sticker thing for less.
Mo, I love just that hack alone. When we can start shifting the identity we have as what this means about us, our money, the greatest thing we have to do to really create wealth flourishing is to separate it from our identity and our sense of self-worth. These deals, they're not personal, they're not about us. There's, it doesn't make you good, bad. And so if you've got a resistance, like, well, if I go in with a lower offer, what will somebody think about me? Well, firstly, treat that other person as a competent, full adult with their own agency. They can also say yes or no. You're not responsible for them. And treat it as this game. I love that. Go onto eBay, go on something and just see what it feels
Just
like and notice what
negotiate. Don't
breeds.
make the first negotiation you do in an auction room where people say like scratch your nose, you suddenly bought like a £500,000 property. Go and negotiate, like do something on eBay. And there's nothing that like the pressure of time, you know, when you see the countdown saying, you know, end of listing is ending in like 1 hour. And you're sitting there and you're saying, am I going to get that thing for £5 or is it going to go for £5.06 or whatever? So, you know, there is that thrill. And, you know, once you can do something like that, the other stuff comes easier. That's what I would definitely say.
I love, love, love that because when we can use active practices to just start loosening the rigid beliefs that we're holding that aren't serving us, that is when the wealthy life we really should be living comes flowing in. So thank you so much, Mo. I know we've gone over time. Thank you for your generosity. For those of you who maybe haven't started, really consider, is real estate something that you need to explore bringing in? It's such a vital asset class. It's such a powerful one you can leverage. You can use the power of leverage, expansion debt to grow. And if you've been thinking, well, real estate's, had its time, it's done, it's not for me, maybe this is the sign to go, well, maybe I need to get myself around somebody who's actually doing it, who's great, literally. So now your portfolio is sort of well over 8 figures, Mo. It pays for the lifestyle and more that you want. It allows you to do all sorts of things. Um, just any last sort of closing words for somebody on really what it means to live your life fully?
Look, we've only got one life, and when you're in good health, you can enjoy yourself. I mean, I've certainly had family members that when they've gone into bad health and, you know, regretted not doing a lot of different things. And what I would say to you is just really be honest with yourself. What do you want to achieve? What are the things on your bucket list, or what are the wealth goals that you have? Don't put it off. Don't put off doing, you know, being procrastinating. This is your life, and this is, you know, you've got to make the most of it. So and that does need, you know, in this world we need money. So just make sure you make the right decisions for yourself and your family so that you can just enjoy every moment, or as many moments as you can.
I love that. And take that action. And you don't have to do it alone. There are amazing, abundant, generous people out there here to serve and support you. So let yourself be supported. Thank you so much, Mo. Click that link. Check out the property motivator. I love that. And it will definitely have you back, and we'll go dive into more detailed aspects around maybe commercial or
Yeah,
HMOs.
absolutely.
Would be
Delighted.
really fantastic. We'll ask the community what they would love more from Mo. More with
Excellent.
Mo.
Well, thank you so much for having me on and for listening, everybody. It's been really lovely to be with you today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.